there's always this question, who is Kivei and what is Minig Anash? So, I'm being Kivei, I'm just testifying a fact that certainly in Chutz La'aretz there is an ambivalence of Chabad, of Anash, to rely on an Eruv, in a city. Even in Eretz Yisrael, when I was in Kfar Chabad, mit gewusst, the Chasidim Shiden, even in Kfar Chabad, were not keen to rely on the Eruv. And I also was informed that when the Frierdiker Rebbe was in Eretz Yisrael in the year Tafresh Peites in 1929, he was surprised that people were bringing the kugel or whatever in Yerushalayim, relying on the Eruv. So there's been always a certain, I'm using the word ambivalence.
Is it to an Eruv or to the way it's done?
So, okay, well, we're going to have to get to that, yeah. So, what happened about 3 years ago, how I got involved in this. About 3 years ago, I got an email from a young lady in New Jersey, on Shlichus, and they are in a town where there is an Eruv, and she says that her husband doesn't rely on the Eruv, they haven't been using the Eruv, but they want to do pi'ulas, activities with children, on Shabbos afternoon, and if they would be able to rely on the Eruv, that would make things much easier, much more effective, and they're not relying on the Eruv, is interfering in a way, is kind of an impediment to their shlichus work. So at the time, I looked at just one aspect of why we don't go for the Eruv, and on that basis I said that I think perhaps your shlichus work would be more important than the chumrah. It's kind of, you're being machmir on the Eruv, and meanwhile you're being mekel on your commitment to your reaching out to people in your area. A couple of days later, I get a long email from her father-in-law. Father, her shver, who happens to be a pseudo cousin of mine. Haven't spoken to him in years, but nothing to do with it. He sent me a long email, and hayatochen that I was matir that they should use the Eruv.
When you asked the question, did you look at the Eruv?
I didn't look at the detail, just one detail of the Eruv, which I said, if that's the problem, then I didn't feel it was such a big issue. But then he wrote to me, there's other problems with the Eruv, and being more familiar with the area, he said this, and with the halachas actually. So that was that conversation, and then comes the Tovshin Ayin Ches. Tovshin, we learned every Shabbos afternoon, we learned Shulchan Aruch, and we'd finished the Hilchos Shabbos, Tovshin Mem Gimel, Mem Dalet, and so I decided to take a plunge and to learn Hilchos Eruvin. And so last summer, from Pesach till Sukkot, we were learning about Eruvin, and I found it very enriching. And when it came to, and there was something which came up, which was unaware before, and I realized here's something very significant in the understanding of Eruv, and would explain why, an additional reason why there is as they say, this ambivalence to the Eruv. So, the more well-known worry about the Eruv of towns is that Etzuras HaPesach, which means two poles, two verticals, and a horizontal above, that's what most Eruvin rely upon. So, does it have a limit? How wide it can be? Can it be beyond 10 amos wide? So this is a machlokas tanoim, machlokas amiroim, machlokas rishonim, all the way through, and the halacha remains that it is valid, but there is as I say, a certain reluctance, because there are those poskim who say it's not valid, and therefore, if you have an Eruv which is made of, let's say, in a village, a small town, it would be made, let's say, with electricity pylons, and you'd be relying on the wires and putting posts at the bottom of the pylons to make it Tzuras HaPesach, it would be kosher, but because the majority of the Eruv is made with Tzuras HaPesachs, I don't know if that's in English or Yiddish, of more than 10 amos, so then there is okay, so I'm telling you there's these two shittas about this, And the halacha, the ikir hadin is kosher, but the Alter Rebbe he says, I don't remember the Gloshon of Bal Nefesh, whatever, he does veer you to be machmir. So, okay. So that's when the majority of the perimeter is made of Tzuras HaPesachs, which are more than 10 amos wide. Now, someone who's coming up and forward, does it mean majority of the perimeter? Does it mean majority of one side? The point is, and which is significant, that if this is the concern in Eruvin in built-up areas, this is not such a problem, because typically the Eruvin in towns like London or whatever. Don't ask me details of Golders Green or Edgware. I haven't looked into them, but I just how do you say, by osmosis, picked up that the Eruvin there are using rows of houses. There's rows of houses, so that's the wall. Then there's not houses all the way because you have streets. So for the streets they have the Tzuras HaPesachs. So really, if the objection is that the majority of the perimeter is made of wide Tzuras HaPesach, that's not true. In a built-up area, the majority of the perimeter is actually houses, which are solid walls. It's the minority which is made up of Tzuras HaPesach, which are taken wider than 10 amas, but that's not such a problem, because it's only when it's the roiv. If it's the miyut, that should not be a problem. So if the objection to the Eruv, if it's in a small town which is made with electricity wires, that's the Eruv, then we have the taina of more than 10 amas. If it's in a built-up area, the likelihood is that isn't the problem. So then we come to a different thing. And here it comes to a very fundamental question. I'm going to use the Aramaic term and then translate. Ose rabim umevatli mechitzta. Does the traffic of the rabbim violate and cancel the mechitza? We have mechitza, we have a barrier, and then we have human traffic. Does the fact that you've got human traffic going in and out, does that say, forget about those mechitzas? What are you talking about? It's mechitzas. There's a rabbin going through. Or do you say, no. Who cares if there's rabbin? It's a mechitza. Mechitza is valid, so what prevails? Does the human traffic prevail, or does the mechitza prevail? Does that make sense? When we've got a conflict, we've got an area which has got mechitzas, yet there's a rabbim which are going straight through it. As you say, a horse and cart going through your which way do you look at it? So now, you've got the sheets in front of you. Take a look on quote Dayan. Now, quote Dayan is in Daf Chof Beis in Eruvin, and it's dealing with, as you see the diagram at the bottom of your sheet, the famous Pasei Beros. The Pasei Beros is an arrangement for there's a well. It's okay. There's nothing spare there. The Pasei Beros is an arrangement, there's a well in the middle of the road. The people are traveling, looks like on Shabbos. I don't know why they would be traveling on Shabbos, possibly within the Tchum, but I'm not sure exactly. But the point, we have the situation, people are on the road, yes, but they're not traveling on Shabbos. But they sort of camp nearby, and this is the source of water. There's a well in the middle of the road. Okay? So now, the problem is the well, which is more than 10 tefachim deep, so the well is a Rosh Hashanah. The street is a Rosh Hashanah. So to take a bucket and pull out water from the well onto the side of the well would be carrying from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, which is obviously Osir Min HaTorah. So the Chachamim came up with an idea of these angles for Dyumdin. Dyumdin would mean a panel made of two. It's a combination. A two-panel structure on all four corners. So in that way, you've got the well in the middle of the road. It's got these panels which are 1 by 1 amah, and they create a barrier to create that this area where the well is inside the Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so it's the middle of the road. You've got some barriers put up, and it's now become the middle of the road, the middle of Rosh Hashanah. It's become Rosh Hashanah, and therefore that allows you to take water out of the well onto the bank, onto the outside, and to drink your whatever you need over there. Okay. So that's the background to Zion. So, says the Mishnah, by Zion. Rabbi Yehuda Oimer, im hoyor derech harabim, derech shus harabim mafsekoson, yishal kelen tzedodin. Rabbi Yehuda says, hang on a second. You're calling it Rishus HaYochid, and you've got the horses and whatever the people are walking through. That's not okay. You're going to have to, if you want to arrange permission to be allowed to carry within the Pasei Beirois, that's the term for it, the Beirois, the wells, and Pasei means these panels. If you want to be allowed to carry within the Pasei Beirois, you're going to have to divert the traffic, the human traffic, around it. Because the traffic walking straight through is going to cancel the validity of those mechitzas. That's the position of Yehuda. In other words, as I said before, Oser Rabim Umevatle Mechitzta. You've made the effort of creating a barrier, but then you've got the Rabbim going through. The Yehuda says that doesn't work. So he's machmi, he says Oser Rabim Umevatle Mechitzta. The Chacham say, relax, it's okay. I don't care if the Rabbim go through, the Mechitza prevails despite the Rabbim passing through. That's the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, Reb Yochanan v'Reb Elazar the Amrit Havayu kan hoidiach koichon shel mechitzas. They comment on the words of the Chachomim. Look what's going on here. You've got mechitzas and you've got Rabbim, and the mechitzas win over. They prevail over the traffic of the Rabbim. Okay. So Reb Yochanan and Reb Elazar have applauded the position of the Chachomim that mechitza prevails and loy oser Rabbim or mevatle mechitza. Okay. So now the Gemara asks like this: Reb Yochanan seems to be applauding that the mechitza prevails. I don't care if the people go through. Kanus virele. Reb Yochanan is applauding. He agrees with this. V'ha'omar Reb Yochanan Yerushalayim ilmole dal suseon in olas balaylo chayovim oleo mishum rishus Rabbim. You have a town called Yerushalayim, and it's got walls around it, and it's got doors, and it says like, if there would not be doors, so it would be a Rishus Harabim. So you've got here 4 panels in the middle of the road, and that's called a Rishus HaYochid, regardless of people going through. You've got a town called Yerushalayim. You've got walls around it. And he says if it wouldn't have doors, then it would be a Rishus Harabim. So how does that fit? So L'choire, when he's saying Yerushalayim surrounded by walls, if not for the doors, would be Rishus Harabim, he's holding that Oser Rabim Umevatle Mechitzta. That the fact that there's a through road violates and cancels the validity of the walls. So we have here, say it looks like, at this point, Elo kan v'lo svirale. So although Rabbi Yochanan has applauded the koichon shel mechitzas, he himself obviously holds like Rabbi Yehuda, that the mechitza will be cancelled because the Rabbim go through.
What's the implication of nil olos balayla? Why didn't it just say it has doors?
No, because there's 2 madregas indoors. There's a madrega that there are doors, and there's a madrega that the doors have to actually be closed. And this is, in the Gemara discusses, there's one shitta which holds that they have to be physically closed every night. There's another shitta which says, even, and that's the halacha, if there are doors, even if they're not actually used regularly, that's adequate.
So, according to shitta,
Rabbi Yochanan,
if it's during the day, when they're open on Shabbos, you couldn't carry them.
No, sorry. No, that's not true. The fact that there are doors makes it that this is...
Right.
Yes, I mean, I've gone through this. Let's say if you go to a campsite and you have, for whatever reason, you're relying on a door, on a gate, and if the gate is open, does that cancel your Rishus HaYochid? So it doesn't. Yeah. Yes, right. Yes, but that's going on to the other shitta who says that it doesn't have to be locked every night. Okay. So meanwhile, Rabbi Yochanan is taking the position that what? Rabbi Yochanan is taking the position that the Rabbim via also Rabbim mevatel mechitzta. Rabbi Yochanan seems to be taking the stricter position. Okay. Then the Gemara goes through. I'll go through this quickly. The Gemara says I got a contradiction of Rabbi Yehuda against Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbanan against Rabbanan. The Tanya, yes, I can Rabbi Yehuda. I have, Baruch Hashem, I have a house on Stamford Hill on the odd side and on the even side, facing one another. And now I've got my kugel in one side and I've got my Shabbos table on the other side. Can I bring my kugel across the road? I've got two walls. I've got a wall on this side and this side. Both of the houses are butting onto the street. So he says, you know what? Here's my house over here on one side of Stamford Hill. I have another house on the other side. I've got here a pole sticking out on that side. And this is the road. Yeah, here's all the traffic going through. But I've got a lechi on either side. Oh, fine. So I'm allowed to carry from one house to the other across the street. What happened to also Rabbim Vatem Mechitzah? Yeah. So obviously they hold that the mechitzas are valid even though the Rabbim go through. That is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. The Chomer says no. You can't just have a couple of poles and that should allow carrying through the street. Kash Rabbi Yehuda, Kash Rabbanan. So what happened? What's happened over here? So let's keep track. Carrying across the street, Rabbi Yehuda had said, it's okay. When the Rabbim go through this Chasibiros, he says, no, the Rabbim have to go around, all the way around. Make up your mind. Here you've said that also Rabbim Mevatel Mechitzah. The traffic would violate and cancel Mechitzah. When it comes to carrying across the street, you've said it's okay. Even though the Rabbim are going through. So there's a contradiction in Rabbi Yehuda. In the Mishnah, it said that the Rabbim would violate the Mechitzah. And in the Braise, he's saying the fact that there's Rabbim going through doesn't violate the Mechitzah. And the same thing with the Rabbanon. The Rabbanon who had been easygoing, and they said, I don't care if the Rabbim go through. And when the Rabbim go through between my two houses, the Rabbanon have had a problem. They said, you can't do that. You have to do something better. So before we get to Rabbi Yochanan, we've got here a contradiction between the Tanoim themselves. Rabbi Yehuda contradicts himself, and the Rabbanon contradicting themselves. Where before Rabbi Yehuda was the Mekel. Sorry, before Rabbi Yehuda was the Machmer, now and here is the Mekel. And before the Rabbanon were Mekel, here the Machmer. And for the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda Lekashe, Hosom de Ika Shtei Mechitzis Mal Yasa. So Rabbi Yehuda answers, what did you ask? I've got two houses on either side of the street, and here I've allowed you to carry, even though the traffic is going through. Here there are two solid walls. There's a solid wall here, there's a solid wall there. Okay, so then I've got a couple of poles, but I've got two solid walls. For the two solid walls, that's enough for me, and I don't care if the Rabbim go through. But with this pasibiros, schwache walls. And therefore he's saying, if it's solid walls, two is enough, and I don't care about the Rabbim. If it's schwache walls, I don't know how you say schwach in English, scant, whatever, so then the Rabbim do violate and do cancel the Mechitzah. So that's Rabbi Yehuda's solution. The Rabbanon Lam Lekashe, Hocho iko shem arba mechitzes, hocho leko shem dal mechitzes. Forget about the dot after the word shem. It's a mistake. So Rabbanon say like this. The difference is, when it's two sides of the road, you've only got two mechitzes to talk about. And that's why we're not happy about it. And they say, Eim arba mishusarabim bekach. When it comes to the pasibiros, scant, nishkant. The point you've got four mechitzes. Four mechitzes, I don't care if the Rabbim go through. So here we have how the Rabbanon have resolved their position and said they hold by strong mechitzes. The mechitzes are stronger than the Rabbim going through. By schwache mechitzes, so then they say the Rabbim going through will cancel the mechitzes. Pardon? Yeah. And what's amazing is what comes out as a result is that this is a stronger Rishus Harabim than Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim's got walls around it, and you say with no doors, it's a Rishus Harabim. And here you got these 4 posts. It's a Rishus Hayochid, and I don't care about that. Okay. I don't know how much time we have. Where's 11:15. Oh, okay. I thought we just had a half an hour. Okay. Now let's take a look at quote Aleph. Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, Shiur Samach Beis. So this is the. All right, we've discussed that. Let's go on to this quote base. Also in Shiur Samach Dalet. V'yafal pi shetzuras haPesach hi mechitza gemura. So this 2 poles on a horizontal, there is a authentic mechitza. V'im osa tzuras Pesach al dabek dalet kundesin. If you put up 4 poles, so this is not the pasei berois, this is even more scant. 4 poles like a chuppah. You put up 4 poles, and you've made tzuras Pesach around them. Rishus hayochid gemura hi min ha'toyre. That's an authentic Rishus hayochid. Afilu also came be'emes Rishus harabim gemura. Afal pikein medivrei tzoifrim ein tzuras haPesach mo'eles Rishus harabim gemura im nishlum b'bo kol tenoi Rishus harabim k'moshin shenizbar b'sim shemim hei. So we've got here, the Alter Rebbe says like this: Tzuras haPesach is going to reduce a Rishus Harabim to Rishus Hayochid min haTorah, but midrabanon it's not good enough. This is very, very crucial. It's, again, the typical Eruv of a town is relying on Tzuras haPesach. And what the Alter Rebbe is saying here is that min haTorah it's not a problem. Min haTorah, this 2 poles in a wire is a proper mechitza. Midrabanon, that's not good enough. And that's where the Chacham kind of commented, Ein me'arv Rishus harabim bekach, midrabanon. When they say those words, which I quoted over here, I quote Dayan, Ein me'arv Rishus harabim bekach, they're not saying chayiv. They're saying it's not adequate for Rishus harabim. You need to do something more. So what more do you want? You've got Tzuras haPesach. You say that's not good enough. Well, what is good enough? So let's read further. Elo habo lahachshir Rishus harabim lahati bo hatiltul tzorich lasis lo delas mikan v'delas mikan. In order midrabanon. So midrabanon, in order to be allowed to carry in a street, it's not enough to have Tzuras haPesach. You need to have doors at either end. Now stop for a second. That would mean if you've got an Eruv in a built-up area, every single point where the Eruv line ends, where there's a road, there'd have to be a set of doors. A set of doors. One door doesn't matter. There are these chochmas of making a door, which is standing in a. I'll just digress for a moment. They make a door, as you said, it is like a rolling shutter. And they have it at the side of the road, and on New Year's Day or Kratzmach, once a year they pull it across the street at midnight for a minute, and then there is such a thing. You have glosses, but these glosses, according to what we're reading here, is not enough just one place. It'd have to be at every single point where the Eruv ends. There'd have to be glosses over there. And not just as another little thing. If this door is inside a box, then it would be Rishus haYochid. Then that wouldn't be valid. They'd have to make a kind of box where it still remains it's part of the street, because if the door is inside Rishus haYochid, it's not valid. Okay, so the requirement of having a delas at every juncture where the Eruv ends, that is a very difficult thing to implement. If that would be done, then this problem would go away. V'hushen in olas balayla. Just a second. V'hushen in olas balayla. The first opinion is that the doors would have to be closed every night. Once there's doors around it, okay. So then it's an enclosed area. It's an enclosed area. Of course, you'd have to make an Eruv to be allowed to carry in there because there's multiple dwellings there. Okay, that's a separate issue. You can do with a matzah, it's a box of matzahs. V'shuv ein armin skula v'shuv ein mevoyser srichim shum tikkun. Once you've got at every end of the Eruv, you've got those doors by every end of every opening. So then you wouldn't have to have Eruv in the smaller town streets within. But yes, there are those who say that ein tzorach shiyun in ulos balayla. You don't need to close them every night. Rak shiur re'uyois linoil. They have to be possible to close. What does that mean? That if the doors were stuck with a pile of rubble, you clear away the rubble, so long as they are possible to close. What's the halacha? That you should have them closing every night. Okay, so if you would tell me that you have a town Eruv which has got doors at the edge of every time the streets meet the outside the Eruv, so then we'll still not be totally happy. Because there's yes, but no, but that would be reliable. Now the big issue is what we have a Rosh Hashanah. Is that what you want to say?
No, just going to clarify. He said in the Yeshua he says he qualifies it a bit by saying it's not that they don't close it every night. It's that it's a bit difficult to close it because they haven't cleared away the rubble. I've just been into Brooklyn, where they've got a wall around the city.
Das machen doch Chasidim dort. Well, I'm sorry, stiller, or wir machen das hier. Sorry, yeah.
They've got a wall around the centre of the town itself.
Yeah.
And when you walk into the town from one end, there are walk-through arches. And then I realised there are actually the doors there, the wooden doors are there, but I suspect they never close them.
Okay.
Simply because it's, people don't sleep anymore, so people go in and out. So it's sort of, so the Yesh Amram says...
That would be enough for the second pshita, yeah.
Right, but here they probably could close them.
Yeah, good, yeah. There's a story in Gemara that was in Mechuzah, they had doors, but they were filled with earth. There's a pile of rubble, so that wasn't good enough. They had to remove the rubble. Okay, so these are the big issue here is when the Alter Rebbe says you need to have doors. That's only if it is a Reshus Harabim Gemura, if it's a real Reshus Harabim. And this is the very, very big question: how do you define Reshus Harabim Gemura? Now we know that the Gemara talks about the dimensions of Reshus Harabim being 16 amas wide. If that's the case, most streets in our part of the world are Rosh Hashanah Gemara. We then have the famous Rashi Tosfos comment of various number of Rishonim who say it's only Rosh Hashanah if you have 600,000 people boikim ba b'chol yom. Now, that is the counter argument to say that the requirement of Deles is only when you have a Rosh Hashanah deraisa. When you don't have Rosh Hashanah, you don't need to have glosses. And if you ask someone who says, all these town Eruvin, what they're relying upon, because we don't have Rosh Hashanah. Now we have to understand that our towns, when the poskim talk about Einon Rosh Hashanah, they are talking about in their times, 100 years ago, 20 years ago, etc. I was once in Hamburg. And in the taxi, I asked the taxi driver, where is the town of Altona? Because I know that Rabbi Yochanan Haibeshitz was a Rov. The Rabbi Yochanan Haibeshitz was a Rov in Kilos Ahu. Altona, Hamburg, Wandsbek. So I asked the taxi driver, where is Altona? Altona. So he said, Altona is part of Hamburg. Where is the city of Greenwich? In London. Where's the city of Westminster? London. Where's the city of Cokestock-Newington? London. It's become, all of these cities used to be separate villages, and now they've all become one big conurbation, for want of a better word. You've got all of these small things, and Amol, they didn't have such big cities. I read yesterday, I published something last week, and I got a bit. Someone sent me an article, a write-up from Rav Belsky's Chayil Vracha. And he tells it that in Varsha, they had 400,000 people living on one side, and let's say there was 300,000 people living on the other side of the river. So Amol, Bechal Varsha was also less than a small town comparatively. But then, because of persecution, whatever, there became a lot of refugees, started conversions. The Varsha became very, very big. And then came winter, and the river froze over. So then became a whole discussion. Does the fact that that you can walk across from one side to the other, does it make it into one town? And then you have more than 600,000 people in town. Once you have more than Shishim Ribu in the town, then becomes a Shaila of Rosh Hashanah Deraisa. So until then, they were not worried about, they were happy with the Eruv because they didn't have a Rosh Hashanah Deraisa. Once they had this question, so then there was a whole discussion in Varsha at the time, this is going back 100 years ago, whatever, 120 years ago, of does the frozen river make a difference to the Eruv? But coming back to what's important to us is that all of when our towns like London, etc., which you've got millions of people, there's no need for, when you say Shishim Ribud Boikim Bo, does not mean at a single spot. It means at least in that road. I'll give you a poshterah. There's a Mishnah which says in Nendorim, Im lo yiroisi b'mokim hazeh ke'yotze Mitzrayim. He makes a shvuah or a neder, whatever. If I didn't see over here, I saw hundreds of thousands of people ke'yotze Mitzrayim, and they say he's being unrealistic. So to say that 600,000 people would walk through the streets in Yerushalayim, etc., and a particular spot is unrealistic. On the other hand, to say they didn't have Rosh Hashanah in the time of the Chazal, Kamen what's the Dayan? In other words, you can say, who says they had Rosh Hashanah then? You know the Raya is, because we don't blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah. We don't take lulav on the first day we don't blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah Shechal B'Shabbos. And we don't take a lulav in Shechal B'Shabbos. We don't take Megillah. Why? Shema Yaver and Dal Dam Shusirabim. So we oike mitzvah deraisa because of a chashash. Shema Yaver and Dal Dam Shusirabim. If there's no Rosh Hashanah, relax. What's Kishazayim? Elamai, they did have Rosh Hashanah. On the other hand, to say that you had a Shishim Libi Boikin at a particular spot, unlikely. Elomai, the pshat is that Stamford Hill, for example, goes from Edmonton or from the M25, and you've got a long stretch, and the same thing, Toronto has got a road called Bathurst. Goes from the top to the bottom, it goes miles and miles, and you've got Shishim Ribui who will be using that road, not a particular spot. That's unrealistic, but it could be a particular point. And so you have here, to say that Einon Rosh Hashanah, to quote the Poskim, is you're not realizing what's going on here. They were talking in their towns. They had smaller populations. They could say with confidence, Loit, the Shitra, you need to have Shishim Ribi. They don't have Shishim Ribi. And therefore, since the requirement of glossois is a drabonon, so you can say, okay, it's a requirement in the Rabbanon, so we can rely that we don't have Rosh Hashanah Deraisa. Whereas, if you're talking about the kind of cities which we have today, where you have you have millions of people in a built-up area, so then you're entering to a chashash of, even to those chittas who say that you need to have Shishim Ribui, you have a chashash that it's a Rosh Hashanah Deraisa. Therefore, you shouldn't manage without losses. Now, just what I want to bring to your attention, point Gimel, and the Alter Rebbe has here a massive chiddush, which I was very, very excited to discover. And what happened was that Rabbi Yochanan had said, we seem to have seen Rabbi Yochanan going back and forth where the Osir Rabim Mevatle Mechitzte. So there was this note of the Alter Rebbe, which was very, very confusing. If you can see what I've underlined here, with the bold. Deles kan, mishum in the brackets in Gimel. Mishum del maskona bedaf chav beis, yeshloima deles kan, or svirle yishloim lo yoshom deles. It's like, I didn't understand what was going on here. And in the new prints of the Shulchan Aruch, they corrected that. Dekan or svirle. The shalaim lo yoshem dal mechitzis. Basically, the Alter Rebbe is saying that Rabbi Yochanan holds that loy osir rabim mevatle mechitzte, yet Yishalayim didn't have proper dal mechitzes. Now, what comes a chiddush from the Alter Rebbe in comparison to the quote from the Mishnah Berurah, which you have over here, is: are we dealing with a chashash deraisa or a chashash derabbanon? the Mishnah Berurah and many poskim say Osur Rabbi Mevatle Mechitzta, and therefore the Mishnah Berurah says a Baal Nefesh should not rely on the Eruvin in towns. That you have your quote from Bir Halacha. He says that he's Noitel HaHachmir, you shouldn't rely on the Eruvin in towns because he holds that Osur Rabbi Mevatle Mechitzta, and therefore the requirement of glosses is a derais. The Alter Rebbe had usgeboyed that actually it's min haTorah, it's a valid mechitza. It's a valid mechitza. The requirement is drabonon. So in a way, the Alter Rebbe is a bit more lenient than the other poskim, the other Litvische poskim. So that kind of sums it up. That why I'm ambivalent about an Eruv in a city, in a built-up city, because even though Lo Yosur Rab Mevatel Mechitzta, min haTorah, it's a valid Mechitzta because it's got Tzuras HaPesachs, but I do have a problem that midrabanon, they said Ein Ma'ar Rishus Rab Bekach, you need to have glosses, and if there would be glosses, if it would be Nu'ulas Balayla, for sure I'd be okay. If it would not be Nu'ulas Balayla, then Yesh Lahachmi, but then you'd say it's an authentic Eruv. If there would be glosses nin oles balaylo mamish, then that's really that's a good mechitz, that's authentic. If they're not nin oles balaylo, only yicholis linoil balaylo, so then the Alter Rebbe says yesh lahachme, but ikakisvara achroino that it's a kosher eruv. But when you don't have nadas, so midrabanon I have a problem. Until there are going to be glosses at every end of the mechitza, wherever the street meets the rest of the city. Until those glosses are there, we have a problem with it. I'm saying that the other poskim we're going to rely upon, the Ein Lo Rishus Rabim b'zman hazeh, but that's a very shvacha heter. That's the maskon. Okay. So people ask from smaller cities. If there's a small town where you've got just a couple of 100,000 people, so then one could be much more ready to rely on the Eruv. No, in a small town, you don't have the Shishim Dibur.
In general, not so excited about the...
It's a machlok, it's a rishoyin. Good, yesh mal lismech. Yes. Pardon?
What about Venice, within the canal?
I don't know. How big is Venice with them?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Let's say it's less than Shishim River.
Yeah, I don't know how it works there. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Something about the river freezing in there was no bridges before.
Okay. All right. Perhaps the bridges had mechitza over them. I don't know. There could be how that would be solved. Okay. Thanks for listening. Kol tov.
Would a bridge over the canal invalidate it if it wasn't?
Pardon?
If it was valid to have the canal,
all right.
the bridge over the canal invalidate
There's a whole issue. Does a bridge make it into a bridge? If you have a bridge which is typically more than 10 amas wide, so if you have mechitza, so yeah, no, the Tzemach Tzedek also talks about this. If you have a town which the north, let's say, of the river has a valid Eruv, but then at one point the town is open to the south of the town with a bridge, and the bridge is more than 10 amas. Is that like does that invalidate mechitza? But the simple way of solving that would be to build an arch over the bridge, and then that would be a Tzuras HaPesach, and if that's the minority of the perimeter, that would be okay.